Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Malts and Meeples. I'm Petter, and today we're continuing that top 200 games of all time. I tried to do 100 in about an hour. I think I got about 40 minutes in, and I realized, I'm just coming up on 50. So, we're going 150 through 101 this time. And of course, no images, anything like that. We're just seeing how quick we can get through them and talk about them. Just really briefly here. So, at 150, we have Unfathomable. Unfathomable is a hit and roll game. I actually said Unfathomable. It's also Battlestar Galactica, hit and roll game where there's a lot of game going on with it, but somebody might be a secret cultist, might be a secret Cylon, and you may not even realize that at the start of the game. It is a really fun experience. It also is just lower on the list because, well, it takes a long time to play. I'm going to be looking off to this side, just a reminder to see the list. 149, we have Quadropolis. Quadropolis, actually, I think just left my collection recently. Very fun city building game where you have different pieces that you can use to grab different elements for your city. And you're trying to fill it up the best you can to score the most points that you can. But with how you take stuff off that kind of central board, it means that you're not going to be able to fill or to always take exactly what you want, because where your opponents take from previously blocks a row and column that you'll be able to take from, I believe it is, as well. So you have some limited choices there. Very fun game. If you saw my top 100, you know that I have Meadow in there, and that's one that uses a similar system that I think does it better. At 148, we have a game that actually I have everything for. I need to play it again. This one was a bit of a bummer in that it's Village Attacks. Village Attacks is a really fun game where you play as the monsters fighting off the villagers. Why I say it's a bit of a bummer is after I played it at Gen Con in 2019, they had a Kickstarter. I believe it was November of 2019. And then sometime in 2022, I believe it was, they went under as a company before that got sent out. And I know there's another company that has picked up this game because it's a good game. And hopefully it will come back in some form later. At 147, we have Arboretum. And for some reason, my brain just froze on me as to what Arboretum is. It's one of those, I have it written down as words, and I recognize the covers as much as anything else. BGG Arboretum is a... Which one is this? Oh yeah, no, Arboretum. I should know when this one is off the top of my head. This is a game about kind of stringing trees together to go from low to high number. And you're managing your hand of cards because you only score the trees that you hold the majority numerically of those cards in your hand at the end of the game. So you're building out this tableau trying to score points, but at the same time you have to work with it on hand management to make sure that you're not building out a great group of trees that's going to score you 0 points. Can't believe I messed that one up. Then 146 is going to be Spires and Hildegard. You can see me play this one on Malts and Meeples here. It's a storytelling game, amazing artwork. I'm looking forward to the third one kind of in the series of games, but it's this choose your own adventure game within some dice mechanisms to battle monsters, things like that. Very fun, good story, lighter story than the first one. We'll see if the first one's on the list up any higher. At 145, we have Raw. This is an auction game where basically you are pulling tiles out of a bag, and people can say, okay, let's stop, let's have an auction. Or you draw, I believe it's a raw tile that kicks off an auction automatically. The great fun about this is that it's a very closed system. So then when I bid, I maybe bid, let's say I bid with a 10. If I win that bid, I take whatever was the previous winning bid, add it to my collection for the next, not the next set of bidding, but the whole next round of bidding. And then everybody, or whoever wins the bid following me, gets 10 to take. So it's a good system, and one that I know is fairly popular. And if you saw what I was doing, I had bonked over my whiskey before stream and got a little on the keyboard, looks like. So 144 is going to be the One Piece card game, or the One Piece trading card game. I like this as a system because it's not too complex. There's very few reaction cards to it that I often find kind of as the annoyance of Magic the Gathering is okay, I do this, then you do that, then I do this. Excuse me. Then you do that, and now we have to remember, with 14 levels deep, how the cards all interact with each other as they come off of the stack. So it makes it simpler than that. The land system, it's not a land system. You are always increasing the amount that you have until you run out. It's this own separate pile that's not part of the deck. That I think it's a really solid system. Next up, we have at 143, we have Grove, the 9-card solitaire game. Grove is going to be a game where you are layering cards to try and produce as much fruit as possible. Another one that I've played here on Malts and Meeples. Very fun system to use and very fast to play. I love this game for, I called it kind of a between meetings game for work. Since it is solo only, I can play it in about 5 minutes. I can maybe even play a couple games in 5 minutes if I'm going real fast with it. And it's one of those things where you can clear your head and get back to something without turning off your brain. Then at 142, we have the Ascension deck building game. This one has dropped a little bit, but it's a very good, pure deck building game. I really like this one a lot. For me, it's, if I'm going to teach somebody a deck building game, it would be up there for ones that I would use to teach, because as you are buying cards, it's pretty simple, and you're looking to just create the best interactions you can between the cards. Has some fun elements like the constructs in there that are a little bit more permanent that other systems have borrowed as well. And actually, this might be another one I played on Malts and Meeples, since it does have a solo mode with it as well. So that was number 142. 141, we have the Pathfinder Adventure card game. This is kind of a story-driven deck-building game where you're adding cards. You have your characters who are different types of Pathfinder characters who will fight monsters, look for clues, and basically try and resolve locations to be able to focus in on where the main bad guy is that you want and that you have to deal with. And as you play more, you level up, you get new cards, new characters, companions to be added to your deck, new weapons, stuff like that. So there's this element of deck construction. It's not so much deck building, but in between those scenarios, being able to kind of bounce your deck to where you want it to be and where it can be. Then at 140, we have Time Stories. Time Stories is a time travel game, and it's a fun one. I've heard that maybe goes out with a little bit of a whimper, or a lot of a whimper, but Basically, your consciousness, your character's consciousness, is sent back in time into somebody else's body, and you have to try and solve whatever the problem is before time runs out. Now, it's a clever system in that time runs out, and your consciousness is returned to your body in the present, and then you can go back and do it again. But because you already have some knowledge, you're able to maintain some elements of the board. There are some things that, as you look at it, you go, okay, yeah, we have to open up this door again, maybe, but we know precisely where the door is. So, kind of your map and spots you can interact with on it change or stay the same depending on how that element works. Then at 139, we have Role Player. Role Player is a game of making a D&D character, and it is a fun game, fun system where you're really just trying to build your best character by drafting dice. And as you draft dice and you place them onto your board, if it's placed in strength, it allows you to manipulate dice in other ways because you're trying to get those stats tuned in perfectly, trying to get your alignment right, you're trying to get the right colored dice in the right spots on those stats. So very fun kind of game in terms of being that thematic D&D character creation experience. And you can actually take your characters from that and bring them into Role Player Adventures, which was very high on my list. So then at 138, we have Welcome To. This is a roll and write, flip and write style game where you're trying to build your perfect Stepford neighborhood. You need all the house numbers to go in order perfectly. Well, not perfectly, but ascendingly. And you need to get those white picket fences, those parks and pools, all of those things built exactly where they need to be, based off of how the cards are flipped out, as well as hit some other like real estate and construction style goals for it. At 137, we have My City Roll and Build. This is My City, which may be higher on the list. I would guess it is, but in a roll and write game, so it's much faster. You can play it solo. I played it solo here on Malts and Meeples, and you still get the chapters and that progression experience with the game. At 136, we have Zona, The Secrets of Chernobyl, where, well, the lands are irradiated, there are monsters, and you're having to go try and find basically this artifact type thing in there. And it's fun, it's kind of big, epic adventure game, but in a one-off experience, which I appreciate. So then we're up to 135. This one has dropped out of my top 100 games, though I suspect it may move back up if I were to play it again, but that is Lords of Hellas. Lords of Hellas is another one of these big one-off kind of exciting games. There's less story and adventure, more area control and combat, but I really enjoy this game because you're either, well, you're going for one of a few different wins. You want to be the person to knock out, I believe it's 3 monsters, take them down, or control, it's either 5 or 6 temples, or control 2 of the large areas, or you're also building up a tower, literally building out these, not towers, statues, as you go. And once a statue is completed, whoever controls that statue at the end of 3 rounds, assuming somebody else hasn't won some other way, they win the game. So, a lot of really fun systems in place. You start with a leader who's going to be asymmetric from everybody else. As temples are built, new abilities are drafted around the table, and so you just become more asymmetric, and what you think you might be going for may end up not being quite what you end up going for, but everybody still can be close to winning. Then 134, we have Deranged. This one is actually another kind of adventure experience of a game. You are in a small town. You are cursed. If you don't get rid of your curses and get out of that town before midnight, before whatever the time frame is, well, you're going to lose. Of course, it's also possible that you can become deranged. If you become deranged, you have to take out another player. That doesn't knock them out of the game. That just gives them more curses that they have to deal with. It's this fun experience of dealing with the monsters and everything on the board, but then that moment where you're like, okay, well, almost got everything, almost got everything, almost got it. Oh, and I'm deranged. Now I have to go take somebody else out and get back to normal and go from there. Then we have at 133 Strike. This is a silly little fun game. All you're doing is rolling dice into a bowl, basically. And anything that matches numerically with another die in that bowl, you take all those dice out, back to your collection. If you roll a die into the bowl, it doesn't match anything that's already in there, you can decide to push your luck, roll again. And there's not really strategy. This is a game that is purely luck, but it's fun to try and figure it out, or try and come up with an idea of okay, well, there are 2 dice in there, they're different numbers, I'm down to my last die, I'm going to try and hit one of those dice so it changes sides, because if I can change that die to a different number, and I can change the die, or the die in my hand that I'm rolling, that's going to be a different number. We've now increased our chances of matching up with that last die, or something like that. I don't know if that's how the math works, but it's fun to think it's that way, and it's fun to try. Then we have at 132 all the Pandemic games. In particular, I want to say that this is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I really enjoy Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I've enjoyed Season 2 as well. I need to buy and play Pandemic Legacy Season 0. And I like the Legacy versions enough that I don't know that I ever really want to go back to the base game, because with the story and kind of unfolding stuff and destroying stuff and creating just this map that's changing so much, I think that it is better in a Legacy version than it is just in a regular version. Of course, that means you kind of have to be committed to playing a number of games. So there is that. Then at 131 we have Small World. Another one previously on the list. And this more stuff moving down as much as they have speaks more to the volume of games that I've played the last few years versus they weren't that great games to start out with, because I still enjoy Small World. It's maybe a touch long, but I really enjoy this area control, just battling over everything, and well, you're going to sweep in, take out a bunch of an enemy, get stretched too thin, they'll retire their race and class combo or skill combo, I forget what they call it, and go grab another group and come in and wreck you just like you wrecked them. So there's none of this risk where somebody is slowly getting knocked out of the game. You might lose a bunch of territories, and then you just decide, all right, I'm done for now. I'm done with this group. Let's send in another group and see what happens. Then at 130, we have a big one. It's actually up behind me over here. Chronicles of Drunagor. This is one that I'd love to stream again. I need to figure out a better way to do it. It might just be that a scenario takes a few nights and it's 45 minutes at a time. That way I can have time to set up stuff in between, because you are setting up as you go. This is a big epic campaign adventure game with cool characters, a fun ability system where you basically have to spend cubes. You have a certain number of cubes. You're spending them on different color spaces to try different abilities. Of course, as you're trying different abilities, then you start to cover them up. Like you use an ability, it is blocked. So eventually you're out of cubes or you're out of abilities that you want to do, you pull everything back. But now you're placing down a black cube over one of your abilities, blocking that off, which you can potentially get back, but that's going to take time. That's going to take a use of an ability to be able to do that. Then at 129, we have Spire's End. I mentioned this was Spire's and Hildegard. Spire's End is a similar game. It's a darker, more twisted story, and you're taking a group in instead of one character. So as your characters get knocked out, you have backup characters to bring in, and it's just this choose your own adventure. Can you figure out how to navigate the story to get to that ending you want? It works really well solo. I think it's mainly meant to be a solo game, though. Like Spire's End, Hildegard, I guess technically you have a second character, so you could play 2-player. This one is definitely built more so you could have 2-player, because you always have 2 characters active. If you get down to 1 character, you've lost. Then at 128, we have 5 Tribes. 5 Tribes. Actually, this is another game that I need to get played again, because every time I play it, I really enjoy it. You're basically using Mancala type movement to move members of 5 different tribes, whether they be viziers, merchants, whatever it might be, and you're dropping them off at locations, and then when you drop that final one off, you pull all the rest of them, all of them with the light color, off that tile, and that's the action you're going to take, and it determines some of like the strength of the action as well, and it's just a really fun system. Add in that turn order you're bidding coins on, so you might see a really great move and you might want to spend for that, but you have to remember, of course, that coins are also your points at the end of the game, or some of them. So you need to be thinking about that as well as you go. Then at 127, we have Project L. Project L is kind of a Tetris-like game where you're trying to get polyomino pieces to fill in various shapes. As you fill them in and you complete cards, you clear off those tiles, you keep those tiles that you use to fill that in, and it generally gives you another one as well, and possibly some points. And it's whoever has the most points at the end of the game after all the tiles are filled in, or after a certain percentage of the tiles are filled in, that it's basically who can build that best engine of getting like the various shapes for your tile, and then seeing how that combos into filling out more of them. At 126, we have Star Wars Rebellion. This is in many ways like original trilogy in a box, where you have your main characters from Star Wars, good and bad. One person's playing good, one person's playing bad, one person's playing, I should say, Rebel and Empire. And the Rebel players are trying to basically raise enough support around the various planets. And the Empire is trying to find the base and take out that base. If they can do that, they win the game. Of course, if the Rebels raise enough support, basically there's a turn track going up and Rebel support going down. If that Rebel support ever pushes over, then the Rebels will win the game. It is a big, long game for 2 players, but it's so thematic and so fun. Then at 125, we have New York City. Now, this one is a fairly different type of game for me, because it's kind of a Euro game where you're spending your resources, spending money to basically get to do various actions. in the game, and you're trying to build skyscrapers, and how you build the skyscrapers, where you place the skyscrapers, that is an area control element of the game. So there's a lot going on in it, but it's fun, and once you get into the system kind of moves smoothly and it's very enjoyable. Then at 124 we have Apocrypha. Now, I previously had talked about the Pathfinder Adventure card game. Pathfinder Adventure card game is the card game that came out before Apocrypha that is based on Apocrypha. Apocrypha is this kind of spiritual horror game where you play as not really saints, but these characters who can kind of see beyond normal things. And it's these weird, kind of dark, twisted scenarios that you're having to deal with, and you're having to handle various situations, various locations, find what you're looking for in those locations, as well as beat other things. And one element that this game has that is a bit more than what the Pathfinder Adventure card game has is that this one has kind of this grid that you build up around your character that, depending on how it's placed out there, that determines who else in your group it can benefit. Then at 123 we have Asking for Troubles. Asking for Troubles is a worker placement game where you are trying to build traps for troubles. And you're looking to get capture more for more points. But of course, to do that, you have to go gather resources, trade those resources in to get what you need to be able to build those traps, to catch specific ones. And it's a fun, silly system. It's not a super harsh in terms of worker placement games, so I appreciate that about it a lot as well. Then at 122, actually I'm pretty sure I sold this one as well. 122 is The Quest for El Dorado. Now, I sold The Quest for El Dorado even though it's two things that I like. It's a racing game and it's a deck building game. The issue is that it's not my favorite deck building game and it's not my favorite racing game. But in this game, you're building out a deck, purchasing more cards to add to it, to basically gain movements across different types of terrain. Because, yeah, you have to specialize into that. And it's fun. It's pretty easy to track. I think for me it was just because, like I said, I have a lot of racing games in my top 100, and I have a lot of deck building games in my top 100, which is why it left my collection, but it's one that I would always be super happy to play. Then, at 121, we have Wits and Wagers. This is a party game. This is a party trivia game. And a lot of times, party trivia games don't work super well. Why don't they work super well? Because you either know the answer or you don't. Well, in Wits and Wagers, it's a numerical answer, and the question always is who wrote down the answer closest without going over. Because you create the number line, low to high, and once everybody writes down their numbers, you create your number line low to high, and then everybody bids on it. They say, okay, I think that so-and-so's answer is probably the closest to right without going over, which allows you to play a trivia game without actually having to know the trivia. Now, sometimes it helps to know the people you're playing with, because, I like sports. So there was a question of like, okay, how many goals did Pelé score in his career? Well, I had by far the highest number. And most everybody bet on my answer. I was right. I was actually low by a ways. But they all bet on my number because they were like, okay, Petter knows sports better. He's most apt to know. So it's It is a trivia game, but it's also that betting and knowing who you're playing with. At 120, we have Metro X, another game that I've played here on the channel. It's about trying to build out as many bus routes or subway routes as possible to score the most points. It's a flip and right style game, and it's simple, fun, easy to play, easy to understand with what you're doing, minus the exchanges. I forget what they call them, but basically the spots where you can put down, you get terminals maybe, or hubs, where you can score points, but of course you're scoring a bunch of points for having a bunch of different things overlap. However, that's breaking up your routes and making it trickier to complete longer things. Then at 119, we have Biblios. Biblios is a deck building, hand management. I don't know how to describe the game completely, because there's an auction element to the game where you're trying to basically have majority in some certain areas for points. But the first half of the game is passing out cards. You're creating this pile of cards, which might be gold, it might be resources, or like the different kind of categories that you're bidding over. And it's fun because of that two-part system. So if it's like the first half especially is really fun, because in a 4-player game, or let's say a 3-player game, I draw 4 cards. I'm putting 1 into the pile for auction. I'm putting 1, giving 1 to another player, 1 to another player, and 1 to myself. But I'm drawing the cards 1 at a time. And I can only do 1 of those per player. So that means there's a little bit of that push your luck of, okay, that one could be good for me, but I still have 2 more cards to draw. I'm going to risk it. Then at 118, we have the Dresden Files cooperative card game. This is, it's the Dresden File books, using kind of a fate system where you play as the various characters and you're trying to solve cases and beat up bad guys. And you need to have more cases solved than there are villains left on the board, or you go into this final showdown. Final showdown generally means that you've lost the game, but you can try. And yeah, you have a choice to make. As some books obviously are going to have more combat, more guys to beat up. Other ones are going to be more on solving cases, but you can look and go like, okay, well, I'm going to bring in a couple of characters who maybe attack a little bit more, or based off of the cards you draw. Okay, we have our cards, we have our hand of cards, probably going to be dealing more with trying to beat up the bad guys. So if we can take out all the bad guys, we just have to solve one case. One case is greater than 0 bad guys on the board. Or it might be like, okay, well, we're not set up to take out these bad guys. Let's see how many cases we can solve. Can we get enough of them solved so that we are in a winning state in the game? Then at 117, we have Doodle Dash. Doodle Dash is a roll and write game where you are going through a dungeon. This kind of makes me want to get the game back. And fighting monsters. It's a pretty simple, light game, roll and write game. But it has that dungeon crawl fun to it. I do think I need to get this one back. I had both boxes for it. I think I just need to get one of them back. Then at 116, we have Calico. Calico is a game with an orange cat on the front, but also a calico quilt. In Calico, you are trying to make a quilt to score the most points. I love this one because it's really tight and thinky as you play. You're adding tiles to your quilt. You need to get like colors together to get buttons. You need to get like patterns together to get cats, but you also have other scoring objectives that might be like, okay, here's this spot. You need 3 of one pattern and 3 of another pattern around it, okay? But you can also get more points if you do 3 of one color and 3 of another color around it. And as long as you do one of those two, you get points. But if you do both of them, you get even more. And so towards the end of the game, you're just like, okay, please draw the tile I need. Please draw the tile I need. Let's get that tile. And then the person before you draws it, or 2 before you draws it. You're like, okay, cool. Play it cool here, Petter. Play it cool. Okay. Don't take the tile I need. Don't take the tile I need. It's just a really fun system that way. 115 is going to be Dice Forge. Dice Forge is a dice building game where you start out with some basic dice that are getting you resources. But as you roll on everybody's turn, you start collect more and more of those resources. When it comes to your turn, you can spend those resources, and you're spending resources to either buy cards or to add new faces to your die. That's basically it for spending resources. So there's this tipping point of, I want to make the best die possible. But if I make the die so strong, I've not been collecting cards, and the cards are generally going to be what gives me points. So I really enjoy that about it. Then at 114, one of my favorite games, Ecosystems. I say it's 114. But I really do love all the ecosystem games, they're just drafting games where you're building out a 5 wide by 4 tall grid to create your ecosystem. And everything scores in a different way depending on how it's adjacent or not adjacent to other parts of the ecosystem. That's what the game is, but figuring out based off of the cards you're seeing coming up, since you're probably not going to see all the cards, to figure out how to best make it work and how to potentially block other people. Really fun time. 113 is going to be Point Salad. I have Eevee Point Salad, which is just Point Salad with Eevees. But it is a game of building out a tableau of vegetables or Eevees in front of you. And on your turn, you're either taking 2 face-up Eevees or you're taking 1 face-down scoring card, which tells you how your Eevees score. So, really fun experience, simple to play, but it's always that good decision of, oh, that's a good looking scoring card. I want to take that scoring card. I've kind of started to build towards that. Okay. Oh, that's another good scoring card. And you end up with like 12 scoring cards and not enough Eevees to be able to score those cards well. Or you end up with a ton of Eevees, but not enough scoring to be able to handle it. Eevees and Eeveelutions, let's be fair. It's not just all Eevee. In fact, it's all Eeveelutions, except for I think there's a mini expansion with Eevees. Then 112 is going to be Village Rails. Village Rails is a game of building out, rails, like a track setup. It's a fun experience of a game. Plays fast. You're basically trying to get money to complete objectives, or to get, not complete objectives, but to get like sections of track. And then when you're playing down those sections of track and you're completing kind of from left to right or top to bottom tracks, you're now looking and going like, okay, I have this engine, I can place it here, I'll score points with it because of that. It's the same company, maybe designer, I forget, as Village Green. So it has some of that feel to it of, okay, I'm creating my grid. How do I kind of meet and create good scoring for the objectives around the outside of it? Then at 111, we have No Thanks. No Thanks is a game about getting as few points as possible and saying no thanks to cards. So everybody starts out with an even number of chips, a number is flipped over. And if you take the number, it's added to your score. So a high number comes up, let's say even not that high. Let's say the first number that comes up is 15. What's going to be worth it for you to take that 15? Probably not right away. You say no thanks. You put a chip on it. And it continues around until there's enough chips on there for somebody to say, you know what, that's kind of worth it. Because chips are worth -1 point, but more so chips give you power in the future. Because the more chips you have, the more time that you can say no thanks to a higher card. And to see how kind of that valuation works out every time is a really fun experience. Then at 110, we're getting close to it, we have Dwellings of Eldervale. So Dwellings of Eldervale is a big worker placement type of game where you are exploring these lands, dealing with monstrous creatures, collecting resources, turning those resources into points, spells, stuff like that. It's not a super light game, but once you get into it, it has a nice flow to it. And then it has fun elements too, like when you pull back your workers, they all can do things for you. Like if you have spots on your board, you can play them out there and they can do things for you. Or, yeah, just some of the powers that you can get. Or you may not pull back a worker because you've turned them into a settlement somewhere, because that's going to give you advantage and points as well. Then at 109, we have Call to Adventure Stormlight Archive. Now, I will say I've played this one cooperatively, where you're trying to take down Omelium. I hope I have that name right. But you're trying to take him down. You're trying to win that way. And you're basically creating the story of your character from your beginnings to like kind of who you become and those epic moments of your story to be able to win. And in a competitive game, because it does play competitive as well, you're doing something fairly similar, but you're just trying to do it better than everybody else at the table. It's a fun game. I do appreciate the Stormlight Archive IP on it because it's one that I know and I like a lot. Then at 108, we have Mindspace. Mindspace is a little roll and write from Allplay, where you are basically filling in spots in your mind, and how you fill them in, there's scoring around how that works, or what's going to be a good way to do it. Some of that scoring, I think, is fairly static. I think there's a little bit of it that changes as well, if I remember correctly. But it's a nice, simple roll and write experience, and I have played that one here on Malts and Meeples as well. Then at 107, we have the Chaos of Galaxy Trucker. Galaxy Trucker is a game where in real time you build out your spaceship with tiles, and then you fly around from system to system, and you're dealing with pirates and meteorites, trying to get the most goods, trying to be able to kind of jockey for position. Of course, the sooner you are, the closer you are to the front, well, you might have a chance to deal with the pirates first. But if you don't, well, then they're coming for everybody. Or the meteorites. The meteorites just come for everybody. They're equal opportunity destroyers of your spaceship. And most likely your spaceship will be at least somewhat destroyed by the time you finish flying. Then at 106, we have Destinies. Destinies is not really a campaign game, but it's a story game where you potentially have, where you're going to have some narratives that are strung together. And those narratives kind of have this, well, it originally was it Destinies, Joan of Arc, or Joan of Arc Destinies, whatever it was tied into kind of the Time of Legends Joan of Arc game that Mythic put out. So it has that kind of grounded element to it, but based off of like the historical stuff of that time, where people were like, oh yeah, we don't know how to describe this, so werewolf, that works, or dragon, that works, to explain what they couldn't explain. And it is more supernatural in nature because of that too. So very simple game too, has a nice app for it, for the story, and everybody has their own goal. So it's a competitive story game, and yeah, just a lot of fun. Then at 105 we have Capybaras. Capybaras is a game about capybara baristas who you're trying to be the one who has the best shop. So you buy different drinks, add them to your shop. They give you different symbols that will match what customers are looking for. So you take those customers, you get money from serving them to buy more things, and you're kind of trying to build out repeat customers as you go. And those repeat customers can score you more points at the end of the game, as well as then kind of get some of the special patrons for the game as well. It's a cute theme, easy enough to play, just a good time. Then at 104 we have Tiny Turbo Cars, which you can kind of see hidden behind code names there. But Tiny Turbo Cars is an RC racing game where you are using these little controllers that are basically a sliding puzzle, and you're trying to slide them into an order so that you can race down the track and be the first one across the line. Of course, you're all doing that in real time. You get an advantage and get to go first if you're the first person to finish, and there's a negative if you're the last person. But if you go too fast, well, then your planning may not be as good as you hope. Like, you mess up one thing and you're just going to spend a whole turn crashing into various objects. And it's a fun, chaotic game that works to have that real-time element in it. At 103, we have a game that fortunately hasn't actually crowdfunded yet. They tried once, and I know they're coming back with it again, from Rock Manor Games, Star Driven Gateway. This one is a blast to play as you're exploring different areas in space. You're trying to complete missions. You are fighting aliens out there, delivering goods, just a bunch of different things with a fun activation system around assigning crew to different places on your ship. So it is about moving around on that main board, but it's so much more about managing the crew. And I really love that element of the game and that element of the experience. And then at 102, we have The Reckoners. The Reckoners, second Brandon Sanderson one in this range. And this is a cooperative game where you play as the Reckoners trying to take down Steelheart. Very cooperative in that everybody kind of rolls dice to determine their actions, but there's this conversation around the table as you're doing that. It's like, okay, first roll, okay, well, I have these, so I'm probably going to be heading over to this part of town to try and deal with these over here. Okay, well, I can take out one if you can take out the other two there. Or, oh, can you research this? If you research this epic, this kind of villainous superhero, then I'll have enough to be able to take them down faster. Like, we can kind of work together. And it's Yahtzee style, though I think you can have more than 3 rolls as long as you take 1 die each time. And you're rolling out these dice, basically gaining different resources. And it might be buying stuff to get more cards, powers, and stuff like that Just a very fun time. And finally, the one that just missed the list, that I believe has been on the list every other year that I've done it, is Blood Rage. I really enjoy Blood Rage. Blood Rage is a drafting game, an area control game, combat game, where you are drafting to basically boost up your Norse tribe. And it is fun. It's a really fun time. I think that it is a game maybe that feels a little bit old at this point. Not like dated. It's just that there are more games that do similar elements to Blood Rage out there now, which I think is why it has dropped off a little bit. And it is a big kind of in-your-face game. It makes sense. It has the name of Blood Rage. So, well, I'm always super glad to play it. It's just no longer, I mean, I think it was my number 2 game of all time. It's no longer just quite up there for me anymore. But there we have it. So, 10 videos for the top 100 games of all time, and 2 videos for 200 to 51, and now 150 to 101, to kind of round out all these different games. And yeah, let me know which game you think should work its way back into the top 100. You can do that down in the comment section below. I appreciate everybody who has checked out all the videos, and hopefully 2024, what is left of it, is a lot of fun for gaming. And then 2025, I mean, we're 10 months away from when I'll do the list again, or start the list again. So, appreciate everybody who has checked this out. If you enjoy this content, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That's going to let you know when I go live. Generally Mondays around 8 p.m. Central, Wednesdays 9 p.m. Central, and then on Friday, my wife and I are playing through Baldur's Gate 3, streaming that here at 9 p.m. Central. But you can also check out then the backlog of videos I mentioned. There's a lot of these games that I have played on stream, but also nerdologist.com to find reviews and articles on board games, as well as other things nerdy related. And then finally, I have a podcast, 10 Minute Marvel. You can find it here on YouTube by searching for 10 Minute Marvel, or wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcast from. But with that, I'll see you next time.